There are things in Red Dead 1 that only make sense years later when we play Red Dead 2, and there are quite a few. For example, there's a connection between the nastiest horse in the first game and Micah Bell, a character who didn't even exist when the first Red Dead came out. We also have a completely hidden story about Bonnie McFarland's ex-husband, a man who died by the edge of Flatiron Lake in 1899, and who Bonnie never even mentions in Red Dead 1. And do you remember Charles Kinnear, the guy we meet in Mexico and see trying to fly? Red Dead 2 has 2 Easter eggs that hint at the fate of this inventor, which we'd only find out about 12 years later. And finally, one of the biggest mysteries in the community, a place where barking has been heard for over a decade, yet no one has ever found the dog. But the weirdest part is that all of this was already in the game since 2010, and it was only truly explained 8 years later with the release of Red Dead 2. So these aren't coincidences, they're interconnected mysteries and Easter eggs that Rockstar planted way back then but only developed years later. And once you start connecting the dots, you realize these games are way more linked than they seem. So stick around until the end of this video because I promise you it's insane. To kick things off right, I decided to bring up a disturbing secret that went unnoticed by a lot of people, a dark connection that stayed hidden for almost a decade in the franchise and was only truly revealed in 2018 with the release of Red Dead 2. And the craziest part? This connection was already there since Red Dead 1, but nobody had noticed it. To understand this, we need to go back to the honor system of the first game. Just like the second one, it also has a morality mechanic, but way simpler. But still, the logic is pretty similar. If you choose to follow the honorable path, you get discounts, perks, and a friendlier treatment from the world around you. But the real difference lies in dishonor, because unlike Red Dead 2, Red Dead 1 rewards you in a much darker way. If you reach the lowest possible honor level, the world starts reacting completely differently. Citizens become afraid of John and only report really serious crimes like murder or bank robbery. Small offenses like horse theft simply stop mattering. But that's not even the most interesting part, because along with that, the game gives you something unique: the Dark Horse, an exclusive horse with black fur, a scarred body, and a practically creepy look, totally different from any other horse in the game. And it's not just about looks, the Dark Horse has a special ability. It doesn't lose speed when riding off-road. In other words, it's perfect for cutting through the middle of nowhere. And now comes the part almost nobody connected. What's the relation of this to Red Dead 2? If you look closely at the gang's horses in 1899, each member has a unique mount, and Micah has Baylock, a black Missouri foxtrotter, and when you put the two side by side, you realize the resemblance is insane. The same dark coat, and especially the same white mark on the face that looks like a skull, and this is where Rockstar gets sneaky, because the Dark Horse is literally the horse of the lowest possible honor, the scum of society, so it doesn't seem like a coincidence that the horse of the gang's most despicable character has exactly that same look. In practice, it's a silent detail, but it works like a warning, a foreshadowing of the kind of man Micah really is. But now tell me, did you notice this when you played Red Dead 2, or are you only seeing it now here in the video? Drop your take in the comments. One of the things I love most about Red Dead 2 is the random dialogues. You know when you walk into a saloon, order a drink, and some random guy starts telling a story? Yeah, that's exactly what I'm talking about. But it's not just the NPCs. The bartenders also drop some pretty interesting lines, but almost no one notices. And the reason is simple. These dialogues aren't subtitled in the game, so they totally fly under the radar for anyone who doesn't speak English. Even people who do speak or understand English often ignore them. But since I've always really liked this part of the game, I always paid close attention to those details, and one of those lines in particular stuck in my memory. It was back in the epilogue at the Tumbleweed Saloon. While I was hanging out there, I heard the bartender say this.
See young Jeb Blankenship? There's an odd one. Found him sleeping out by the horse trough. I'll be damned.
As you could see, he mentions a guy named Jeb found sleeping next to the horse trough. A simple, short conversation and apparently meaningless, but it's still stuck in my head because I recognized that name from somewhere. And after a while, it finally clicked. This guy shows up in Red Dead 1 during a mission. If you played that mission, I'm sure you remember it. It starts over at Rathskeller Fork with John finding a man completely desperate. His name is Jeb, and he's crying because bandits kidnapped the love of his life and took her to Tumbleweed, a town that in 1911 is pretty much a den of criminals. John, being the good Samaritan he is, decides to help and heads to Tumbleweed to rescue the woman, but everything changes when the dialogue kicks in.
What you doing here, mister?
I've come for you. A mercy mission. Your poor wretch of a man lost his mind. Seen him at Rathskeller Fork.
My man? My man's dead. Lawman shot him about a month ago. Shot him in the back, coming out of a cat house. Gave themselves medals. Just like I gave myself to that poor bastard. Unless you've been to hell, you ain't seen no man of mine.
Then where is she?
Who?
Jeb's girl.
Who's Jeb?
Creepy kind of guy. Short black hair, mustache.
Oh, my, oh, my. This is Lucy. This is Jeb's girl.
As you saw, Jeb's wife is actually a mare, and when we bring the animal back, the scene gets even stranger. The guy starts hugging the horse, calling her love like she was a real woman. Jeb is definitely not all there upstairs, and the weirdest part is that it didn't start there. The first time we hear about him is in 1907 in the Red Dead 2 epilogue, and by then he already had these strange behaviors. 4 years later in 1911 during Red Dead 1, he's exactly the same. But the story doesn't end there. In 1914 during the epilogue with Jack Marston, you can find a newspaper article about his fate, and that's where Rockstar takes it even further. The paper reveals that Jeb married the mare in a small ceremony in town, and even though no friends or family showed up, the wedding was considered a success. I don't know about you, but these little details always blow my mind, because they show the level of continuity in this universe. It's not just a random joke thrown in there. It's a story that spans years and directly connects Red Dead 2 with the first game. And that to me is what makes Red Dead 1 a timeless masterpiece. It doesn't just wrap up the stories of key characters like Bill Williamson, Javier Escuela, and Dutch van der Linde, but it also keeps the story going for completely forgotten characters. So if you've never played Red Dead 1, just know you're missing out on a huge part of this story. One of the most charismatic characters in Red Dead 1 is without a doubt Bonnie McFarland. She won over players for several reasons. One of them is that she saved John Marston after that disastrous encounter with Bill Williamson at Fort Mercer. But that's not all. Another thing that always stood out is the platonic love she feels for John. Throughout the story she drops several hints and even pushes John to assert himself and make it clear he's a married man, just to try to put an end to her advances. But that didn't make her feelings disappear. We see that in the last meeting with Bonnie at the ranch. When John leaves with Abigail, she just stands there watching him go as she drags her foot through the sand almost like a child. It's a simple scene, but it hits really hard, especially when you understand her situation better. Because Bonnie isn't alone for lack of suitors, quite the opposite. She's beautiful, daughter of one of the most influential men in the area, and heir to a prosperous ranch in New Austin. In other words, she'd be one of the best matches possible in that world. Plenty of men wanted to marry her, because besides being pretty, let's be honest, she's also a really great person. But there's one detail: she never fell in love with any of the suitors who showed up, and that explains why she's still single in 1911. But what no one knew until Red Dead 2 came out is that Bonnie had actually been married before, and the way the game reveals this is just plain bizarre. While roaming the shores of Flatiron Lake, you can find a man passed out on the sand, and when you get close to loot the body, you realize he's still alive.
Whoa! I thought you was already gone! Tell her I never stopped.
In his final seconds, he hands Arthur a letter and then dies right after. And this man, ladies and gentlemen, is none other than Bonnie's ex-husband. And when you read the letter, everything starts to make sense. It was written by the man himself, apologizing, admitting he always had problems, but insisting that they were meant to be together. He says he dreamed of raising kids with her, that she would be happy by his side, and that he was going to travel the world in search of fortune to come back a rich man, worthy of her and her father's approval. In other words, while Bonnie saw a troubled relationship, he pictured a perfect future that only existed in his head. But as we can see, fate was cruel to Bonnie's ex. For some reason, the marriage ended and he set off on a risky journey to find wealth. In his mind, this would fix everything. He'd win Bonnie back and finally earn Drew McFarland's respect, who never approved of the relationship because he was a poor man. And in case you were wondering, yeah, I already tried to deliver that letter to Bonnie in the epilogue with John, but when we get to the ranch in 1907, we find out the McFarland family had temporarily moved out, fearing the armadillo cholera outbreak might reach the ranch. So it's very likely Bonnie never found out what happened to this guy. Not that it would have changed much, right? Because in Red Dead 1, she never mentions him. In Red Dead Online, when we meet her, she also never talks about him. But if you want to find out what happened to Bonnie after the first game's events, I've got a video about that coming up. And since we're talking about memorable characters, I couldn't skip mentioning Charles Kinnear. If you played Red Dead 1, you probably remember him. We run into Charles during our travels through Mexico, always alongside his invention, a machine that, according to him, would let a man fly with the birds. The problem is, the invention isn't ready yet, and that's where John comes into the picture. We need to gather some materials to help the inventor, like bird feathers, beaver pelts, and some plants, so he can finally finish his creation. When we come back with everything, we witness one of the most absurd scenes in the game, one of the earliest attempts at human flight, and the key word here is attempt because at first it actually works. Charles jumps off the cliff and for a few seconds really glides, but everything falls apart fast. The machine goes out of control and he just crashes from the sky, hitting the ground hard. As expected, the inventor doesn't survive. But here's an interesting detail. He can't say he wasn't warned because years before all this, the game had already dropped all the hints. During the Red Dead 2 epilogue in Cholla Springs, you can find one of the first prototypes of this machine, and it's completely wrecked, the result of one of those tests that clearly went wrong. And this is where the connection starts to make sense, because this machine is pretty much identical to the one that shows up in Red Dead 1. Same design, same concept, and the same disastrous outcome. But there's one detail that seals the deal. On the right side of the frame, you can see the owner's name engraved, Charles Kinnear. So by 1907, he was already trying to fly, failing, crashing, and barely escaping death. But the worst was yet to come. Years later, down in Mexico, the final attempt ends just like we saw, but the story doesn't start with him. Actually, this obsession runs in the family. During one of the movies you can watch in Red Dead 2, we discover the story of Aldous Kinnear, Charles's father. And guess what? He also died trying to fly, a victim of his own invention in an accident almost identical to his son's. But it goes even further because Charles wasn't the only son. In Big Valley, there's another spot on the map that hardly anyone notices. There you find another crashed flying machine along with a body in an advanced state of decomposition. That body is most likely his brother Percival Kinnear. So the dad died trying to fly, Charles did too, and Percival, well, he met exactly the same fate, all driven by the same obsession and all paying the same price. But now tell me, had you connected all this, that these wrecked machines in Red Dead 2 are directly linked to the missions from the first game? I went pretty far to put all these pieces together, seriously, and so if you're into this kind of content, go ahead and leave a like and subscribe to the channel. To wrap up the video on a high note, I saved the best for last, a mystery that started way back in the 2010 Red Dead and stayed unanswered for years. Back then, there was a huge debate on the forums about something really weird happening in Plainview, an oil field in New Austin pretty close to Fort Mercer. Players began hearing dog barks there, but it wasn't normal barking. The barks came from different directions, kept changing position, and always seemed to be at a certain distance. They're constant, persistent, and seem to come from far away, but that's not the issue. The problem starts when you try to find the dog because it simply doesn't exist. And that's weird for a very specific reason. Red Dead 1 already has dogs in the game world, and Rockstar doesn't usually use animal sounds without the actual animal being there. In other words, if you're hearing a dog, there's supposed to be a dog, but nobody ever found one. The community tried everything, multiple searches were done, players explored the whole area, and still nothing was found. That's when the debate began. On one side, those who believed it was a mystery, a ghost dog that John couldn't see. On the other side, the more skeptical group who thought it was just a bug, a Rockstar error, maybe a sound without a source. And that doubt lingered for almost a decade, until 2018 when Red Dead 2 was released. And when we go back to Plainview now in 1907, the same barking is there, just like before, distant, changing direction, and still impossible to locate. And once again, no dog. At this point, the bug theory started to lose some steam because it wasn't just a coincidence anymore. It was something Rockstar actually decided to keep, but the final confirmation came shortly after, with the release of Red Dead Online through one of the most mysterious characters in the franchise, Madame Nazar. In one of her dialogues, she specifically mentions this phenomenon.
The oil drill down the road, I saw the spirit of dog there once, calling for his master.
According to her, what's in Plainview isn't just any animal, it's the spirit of a dog that keeps wandering the area searching for its owner. In other words, that sound no one could explain was actually real, and more than that, it was intentional. A mystery left unanswered for 8 years until it was finally confirmed. Now, whether this was the plan from the first game or if Rockstar just took something that seemed like a bug and turned it into lore, we don't know. But one thing's for sure, the way they revisit these little details and turn them into something bigger in the next game is simply insane, and that's exactly what makes the Red Dead universe so alive and vibrant. Just imagine what awaits us in GTA 6. There are so many other secrets and curiosities in Red Dead 2, and I'm sure you don't even know half of them. This game is just insane in terms of detail, from small things like hidden dialogues and weird NPC stories to bigger connections that span years. And that's what always gets me, because the more you play, the more you realize there's always something new hidden somewhere. If you want to uncover the best kept secrets, Easter eggs, and hidden curiosities in Red Dead Redemption 2, just click here on the yellow arrow where I'll reveal details you probably missed and some surprising theories about the game. Don't miss it, we'll see each other again in a few seconds, so big hug and see you soon, bye.